building rental units slowly and gradually over time. This self-organised housing, it generates demand for materials, for products, for services, for skills, and labour that is all part of the building and the finishing process that goes into building a house. This is what we're calling the housing economy, and this is what we wanted to investigate. And one of the things that's important about the housing economy is that it mostly operates in the absence of formal financial institutions. People are not taking out loans or mortgages, but they are self-building through their own savings, through self-financing, and this is what we want to try and understand. So we asked 3 research questions. The first research question tried to understand how people have improved their housing situation over their life course. So how people have moved from being dependents, living in usually their parents' home, to being a tenant, to becoming careers was survey-based, and in Accra we did 80 surveys and we did 41. We did 80 surveys and we did 41 in Teshiman. And these weren't trying to be large-scale representative surveys. These were organised in order to try and capture people's experience over the life course. So we interviewed groups of people in different age categories. So we're not trying to say, we know that this is not statistically relevant information, it was more survey-based to try and get an understanding of how people move through housing through their life. The second research question about the housing economy, we did interviews and discussions with house builders and business owners, labourers, people with a welding workshop, people making blocks and bricks, to try and understand how the self-build economy operates. And then the third question about housing improvements and neighbourhood change, we were interviewing residents and local businesses to try and understand how their neighbourhood had changed over time. This is a very brief summary of the findings, and my colleagues will talk about this in much more depth. For the housing careers and how people move through housing over their life course, we found that actually self-build, self-organised housing has enabled the majority of people who are older to move from dependency to tenancy to ownership over their lives. But some people do remain stuck and are not able to become owners. And there's a massive question, I think, about the future and today's young people and whether they will be able to replicate what their parents have been able to do. The second major finding is about the housing economy, which we think is incredibly important and deserves greater policy attention. And George and Isaac will talk about that in more detail. And then the third major finding is that housing standards have really improved. People have invested a lot in improving their homes. And that has meant that demands for the businesses in the housing economy have increased and they've diversified. This is important because it creates opportunities for local businesses, but it also contributes to inequality at the neighbourhood scale because not everybody can improve their home to the same standard. So these are our general findings, and I now invite my colleagues to talk about these in more depth, and then there will be an opportunity for questions after that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Now we have a representation from Dr. Atta and Professor Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavis. Yes, good morning once again. So as you can see, the title of our presentation, Self-Built Housing in Urban Ghana, Insights from Accra and Teshiman. And I'll be doing this with my colleague, Professor George Osu. So this is going to be the outline of our presentation, where I'll take you through the introduction, review of housing conditions in Ghana, the methodology and study area, Then the rest, which is on the key findings, some challenges of self-built housing in Ghana, and then the conclusion and policy recommendations. Now, in Ghana, when it comes to housing delivery, there are three main sources. The first has to do with the profit-led private real estate companies who build all manner of houses for sale or sometimes for rent. Then we have the state through some initiatives like in the past where we had the State Housing Corporation being very active in building houses around the cities, like in Accra we had the Dansoman Snake Flats, the Dansoman Estate in general, Denta and the likes. And then we've also had government agencies like the University of Ghana, for example, providing accommodation for its staff, the security services providing accommodation for their staff, and so on and so forth. And then the third unit is actually individuals. So that is what we refer to as the self-builders, the private self-builders. And in Ghana, it's important to note that annually it is expected that 100,000 units of housing are produced. But unfortunately, we're able to produce 45,000. And out of this 45,000, 90% of them are coming from self-builders, the private individuals building these houses. And this is quite intriguing. And what interests us most is that it's not just about these houses that are being produced, but also the economies around it. This initiative sort of stimulates a lot of economic activities as well as employment. And now the question is, whom would you define describe as a self-builder? That is an individual who is building without any formal or government support. There are instances where that's how, in a very simplistic way, that's how we can define the self-builder. Now, irrespective of how the self-builder is defined, there are certain characteristics, there are certain things that are connected with them. The first thing is that they build incrementally. In Ghana, we have about, it takes about 10 years for the, on average, for the individual to build a house. And this is done very, very incremental. At some point in time, the individual acquires the land. In about a year or two, that is when this is the land to start foundations and so on and so forth. And the process is very flexible. So that contributes to the incremental nature. But the underlying factor too is that a lot of people, do their own savings, and it takes a long time to amass so much money to start the housing process. So basically, people do this by self-financing. There are a lot of Ghanaians who are risk-averse by way of going to the banks for loans. Mortgage is basically something that a lot of people don't even know about. For those who know, they are also not interested, So a lot of people do self-financing. And in terms of the construction process, there are instances where people rely on families to help in the construction process. But of course, others who pay people to help them in the process. And there's always that question of who owns a house in Ghana. What is actually a completed house in Ghana? Because there are a lot of people who move into their houses uncompleted. There are a lot of people who move into their houses in the absence of services such as roads, electricity, water, and the likes. So they manage through the process. And this is very characteristics of self-building in this country. And usually, these houses are found in the peri-urban areas because land in the central parts of the cities are very expensive. We tried at Christian village where we did our studies, we asked for the price of land, golf fields, and we're being told that prices start from 100,000 up. How many Ghanaians have saved 100,000 to purchase a land in that area? So you find a lot of them going to the OEBs, the OERFs, and the likes in the peri-urban areas of our cities. But despite the dominance of self-build in Ghana, we realize that academics are not giving a lot of attention to it, and so is policy. In the 2015 National Housing Policy, for example, there wasn't any direct reference to self-building, even though you have a lot of Ghanaians in that venture. So this raises a lot of questions for us as to why policy is not giving some attention to self-building in this country. So given this overview, the objective of this presentation is to highlight some of our findings on self-built housing in Accra and Techiman. And specifically, we'll be looking at housing careers, the changing housing types and its implications to self-build, the housing economies and self-build challenges, as well as the policy options. Good. When it comes to housing conditions, indeed, the academic literature has actually captured that there's been a lot of studies on housing in Ghana, and a lot of them have focused on, from the demand side, they've looked at rapid population growth. As the population increases in the cities, there's the natural need for housing, and a lot of people have done that. We've had youthful population, and therefore people, as they mature, they would want to have their own places of abode, and that has been well captured in the literature. New urban household formation. In the past, we used to have very large families, and most of these large families were in single or two-unit rooms. But this is changing. Today, more Ghanaians are having less children. So it means that that is also affecting family sizes and household sizes. So all of these are leading to the demand, are contributing to the demand for housing. And of course, the housing preferences are also changing. And when you look at the supply side, the issue is about land. Land is the fundamental thing. How to access land in terms of price and availability. So that is where the whole discussion starts. And then we also have issues with poor infrastructure. Poor infrastructure also affects self-building, because sometimes people would even purchase the land, but so that would naturally put them off. And then the high interest rates, it's also another issue. There is one thing that we've also identified recently in this in Ghana, that the from the last census, we realized that there's been a reduction in the houses in Ghana, the houses that are produced in Ghana. We used to have a deficit of 2.8 million, but that has been reduced by 33%. So that's resulted in the 1.7 million. But you may think that that's a significant achievement, but if you still have 1.7 million deficit, that is also a challenge, something that we need to look at in this country. So, in view of this, self-building has become the norm, that everybody is trying in his small way to put us a house. But there's also a significant lot who are not able to do that, so they are the ones that end up in the slums. And we've seen a lot of slum proliferations in our cities. One interesting thing that we've also observed is the types of residential accommodation. In the past, compound house used to be the dominant housing typology in our country. I'm sure a lot of us here have all lived in compound house. Is there anybody here who's never lived in a compound house? Maybe Claire, you haven't. But quite a number of us have experienced compound house, or you know somebody who's lived in a compound house. Yeah, but in recent times, we've seen the decline of compound houses, at least from the census, housing and census data from 2000 up to 2021. We've seen that decline of compound houses, and now the dominant one is the separate house, or what we call the detached or self-contained houses, and that seems to have increased over time. And this is a reflection of Accra, that we have a lot of people who are living in self-contained houses, and we see that also in Techiman. We were thinking in the course of our research, we thought that Techiman is more of a traditional, area where the social bonding seems to be high, so they will live in compound houses, but that is also changing. So you can see the decline in compound houses, and there's a high demand for separate houses also in a place like Techiman. And given the fact that there are a lot of people moving away from compound houses to detached houses, this raises concerns that, people begin to question that, okay, how is this going to affect the urban poor? Would they have the resources to live in these detached houses? Because they tend to be more expensive, right? So it's quite problematic. And for those who would want to live in such houses, it means that it's going to affect their savings, because one would have to save so much in order to afford such houses. But then, when they are spending so much on housing, then the question is, what do they spend on other things? So that becomes a bit problematic. But in spite of all these challenges, there's a stronger incentive for the urban poor, a lot of people, to own their houses. So it means that housing in general has become sort of a norm, a social norm that everybody wants to. It's part of things that everybody wants to have. Sometimes you listen to people and they are like, oh, when I get money, I'll build a house. So in the mindset of almost every Ghanaian, housing is a very important thing, right? And this is being channeled or from the perspective of self-building. So it fuels intense demand for land, because if you're going to build, you obviously need a land. So this is putting pressure on land on our cities. And it also leads to unplanned development. And one of the things we've identified is that sometimes people want to have their own houses out of pressure. They live in a house where the landlord is demanding for more rent and the like, so they want to move out. And in those instances, they have to develop their land in an unplanned area. And this is also raising a lot of questions, issues of flooding and the likes. They all contribute to it. So in this research, this is the methodology that we've used. Claire highlighted a bit on that. It is a purely qualitative research where we've used semi-structured interviews. So in Accra, for example, we relied on 80 respondents, and then in Techiman, relied on 41 respondents. And this actually captured homeowners and tenants. And of course, we used a lot of desk review and other in-depth interviews, also in relation to landlords, tenants. You may be asking why landlords and tenants in this category. It's because some of these landlords and tenants operate businesses in their homes. The key thing was to look at people who were engaging in businesses in their homes. So we did that, and then of course we also dealt with the local planning officers within the municipality of our study area, and then the owners of businesses selling house input, so those who are dealing with raw materials and the likes, and then with artisans. And then we did what is called the floor tour. So we visit homes and then we engage them in discussions where people will give us details about their houses, like, oh, this is a 4-bedroom house, it has a toilet, it has a kitchen, and so on and so forth. When it was built, the process they went through, and all that. And then we did direct observations and took a lot of photos to understand the process. So this is the study area. The first one has to do with the Christian Village and Goldfields. These two communities are located in the Okaikwe North municipality of Accra. So Christian Village is just close to Goldfields. They tell us that they're actually one place. But over time, you know, Christian Goldfields became like a high-income area, so they gave it a new name, and then Christian Village stayed in its traditional setting. And this is a village, if you take Christian Village, it was founded in the 1920s, named after a man called Christian Aboshi, one of the workers who were part of the construction of Chimoka School. And it's a densely populated area, congested with low-income houses. And Goldfields, on the other side, is a high-income neighborhood, right, close to the golf course. So I believe that is where the name Goldfields came from. And it's been transformed from farmlands into a high-income area. It features large street layouts, huge plots, large buildings with different aesthetic elements. And when you compare that place with Christian Village, you realize that whereas Christian Village have a lot of single units, they tend to have story buildings, and they still have a lot of buildings under construction over there. And development in the area started from the 1990s. So if you compare Christian Village with Goldfields, Goldfields is a relatively new area. So the pictures says it all for you. This is Christian Village, and this is Goldfields, the type of housing that you find in these two communities. And I'm sure some of you will be wondering why Christian Village and then Goldfields. Obviously, in Accra, you have high-income areas as well as low-income areas. And we thought that, given the fact that these areas were close, it was very good for our analytical purpose or for a comparative analysis. Good. And then the second area that we looked at is Techiman, which is a secondary city. You know, Christian Village and Goldfields are in Accra, which is the primary city. So it was important also for analytical purpose to look at the secondary city. So we went to Techiman in the Bono East. Techiman is a nodal center, you know. It's an area that connects Ghana to the Sahelian area and then also to several parts of the north. And it's a key market area, so that tells you that in terms of economic activities, it's very vibrant. And now, as a result of the reorganizations or the creation of regions, it's become one of the new regions. And we have the municipal administrative capital, you know, located in the Techiman municipality, and it's also a very traditional capital. And we looked at two areas, communities within Techiman. We have Takofiano and then Henswa. Takofiano emerged in the 1970s. They were in a different community altogether, but as a result of a severe flooding that destroyed their city, so they were brought, their community, they were brought to the inner part of the city. And it's a well-planned area, they have great layouts, but the unfortunate thing is that it's predominantly inhabited by poor people. And you have a lot of people who migrated from other parts of the country, especially in the north, residing there. And if you go to Henswa, that's an entirely different story altogether. Henswa used to be part of the Workers' Brigade area. Many years ago, the government had this state farms. So Henswa happens to be one of those areas. But as a result of the collapse of the state farming activities, the chief has decided to sell the lands for housing purposes. So it's sparsely populated, but with very large mansions because of the high-income people who've decided to settle there. The roads and drainage systems, unfortunately, are poor, even though you have very large houses there. And the prices of land are pretty expensive as compared to Takofiano. But Takofiano seems to be like a built-up area, and that's clearly a reflection or resonates with Christian village in Accra. So this is a map of the area, so you can see Takofiano and Sora in the map. And this is also a picture to give you a sense of how the area is. It's fast developing, and this is some of the lands, the buildings that you can find. And then these are some of the road networks within this area. And this is Takofiano, which has some of the old compound houses. As I indicated earlier on, it's well planned with the grid system. They have a drainage, but the road in the city, in the community is not tarmac, and that also raises some questions. And in the back ends of the area, you also have certain places that need some development. Good. So at this point, I'll invite Professor Joyosu to take us through the key findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isaac. And let me also thank my colleague Claire for setting us up to this point. So what I'm going to do is to share with you some of our key findings. And I'm going to share with you 4 main findings. The first is when we talk about the housing career in terms of gender and age. To our surprise, we find out that even though Claire, my colleague who's leading this project, talked about the fact that the semi-structured interview that we did wasn't representative enough in terms of the sample size and so on and so on. But when we looked through the data, it was quite surprising, both Accra and also in Techiman, that the role of women in home ownership. That was one of the surprising things that we find out. How do we explain this? We think that what is happening across our cities is the fact that land is now commodified. And so women who have access to cash or are well-to-do are able to go beyond the cultural barriers in terms of access to land. And therefore, you have women play a key role as homeowners and as well as tenants. In fact, in Techiman, the figures were even higher because we understand that Techiman is a very vibrant market center, not only in Ghana, but for the West Africa region. So that is it. And then we realized that we also look at the age categories. And we realized that for many above the 60 plus, many of them were also homeowners. And not too surprising, the young ones were those who found themselves to be the tenants. We realized that, as I said, for women, I think their role in terms of support, providing household income, which is something that I'll come back to. Home-based economic activities allow them to be able to contribute as tenants and also as homeowners. And so that's one key finding. The other key finding that we found out was the fact that in terms of access to land, we realized that land, having access to land is a key step in terms of pursuing the path or engaging in self-building. And we found out that for many people, the mode by which they access land is through purchase. I don't know whether there's a chief here. The chiefs don't want us to use the word purchase, but the reality from our respondent was that they buy the land on leasehold basis, and then that's how they start the process of building. In the past, if you go through our history, the past land was seen as selling land was seen as taboo, but it's no longer the case. Or submitting something token to be able to have access to land. But that's, as I said, that's not the case. People do acquire land through purchase or exchange of money. Inheritance, that as we said, we find very little of that, or land be given out as a gift. So basically the point is that in our urban settings, inheritance and gift, if you are waiting for somebody to dash you land to build, you are not going to get it. You need to find the money to buy. In terms of financing, which is also wasn't too surprising, but we realized that the use of mortgage was basically out of question. Many of these houses were built with personal finances, and then, like Isaac said, they build incrementally, depending on their savings and so on. So the land is acquired, the person go through the process of getting materials, and gradually over a period, and that basically also accounts for the reason why it takes so long a time to build. Then I realized that for many places, self-built housing is basically the basis for community change. It is individuals moving into these places, starting to build, providing the basic infrastructure. And it was only after some time that you have the state or local government coming in to provide the support or the basic infrastructure. The third, the other finding that we found very interesting is the fact that when in Ghana and in our two study sites that are Accra and Kumasi, that housing construction is an intergenerational activity. That is quite surprising because if you look at the literature on self-built in general, this is not highlighted much. But we find out that in many of the interviews that we did and the process of construction of the house, you realize the father and mother handling a piece of land, putting up a structure. Then over time, children growing up and coming to start the process. And interestingly, we realize that housing construction investment in education and training of children were seen as two processes which influence each other. So you realize many of them, you find a quote here where a father will purchase a land from a chief, develop it, at the same time trying to support the children to acquire education and so on and so forth. And then it is expected that when the children have acquired education, train themselves in whatever trade, they should come and complete the house. And it's something that we find across all our studies that housing construction is not one of them, but an intergenerational activity. The last findings, which basically reinforce the earlier comments made by Claire, is that self-built housing generates a lot of economic activity and employment, and it's something that we need to pay closer attention to. Businesses, job opportunities, there's a lot that we find, and we got this through our in-depth interviews with the artisans, welders, metal fabricators, carpenters, and even interviewing home-based economic activity, because in many cases, even when the houses have been completed, people are living as tenants and landlords. They use the house as a place of work, and that generates a lot of home-based economic activities. So in all the communities that we find something that a house, a kiosk somewhere in front of the house, usually along the main road, or a road running in front of the house, you find these kinds of activities. Somebody selling something and making a living out of it. These are some of the pictures from Accra here, this same village. You find a lot of these things there. Even in the high-income areas, we find this one on your top right from golf fields, where in front of the house the person is running a drinking bar, which we as the main source of income for the or livelihood for the family. A lot of what do you call it, for the input side or the supply side, building materials, wood, paints, what have you. We found this what do you call a block making factory, and we find them all over, and they are all related to. They are not producing these blocks for a company, a real estate. They are producing for the self-build, for the self-builders, for the self-build market. As we see here, metal fabrication. We have a picture on the top right showing an uncompleted house, carpenters on the site, how the sun got there through trucks or transport, the truck operators, the sun miners, what have you. All these activities create a lot of economic activities. And then even when the area is built up, the demand for the school. The presence of the school is because people have come to self-build and the whole community has developed. Homes being used for, as I said earlier, other businesses. Yeah, and it continues. Companies being set up to provide roofing sheets as well. This is coming from Tachima, not Accra. And in Accra, we find several of these companies. So we sat through and tried and analyze the economy around self-build, and we came up with these four interrelated economies. We call the land economy, the input economy, and the construction economy, and the output economy. And we said that the argument we are making is that if you take each of these economies, there are several activities that goes on, there are several jobs that are created, the selling of the land by either the traditional leaders or chiefs or whatever, land-owning families. It generates some activities that creates jobs, that create economic activities, and so on and so forth. If you take the input economy, inputs, material supply, if you take the trucks supplying the sun, and so on and so forth, the infrastructure that goes with it, the financing, be it informal or formal, the labor and what have you. And then you take the construction sector, the artisans, our surveyors, architects, development agents, and what have you. It's a whole lot of economic activities surrounding self-build, not for big companies, but self-build. And then, even when you get to the stage when the house has been produced, other economic activities, as I've said, I showed you with the school, other economic activities do take place, and jobs are created that we need as a country to pay attention to. And it is the growth, it provides the basis for economic growth in our urban settings, it contributes to the neighborhood change, and consequently the overall development that we aspire or look up to. So there's a whole lot of things happening with self-build that we need to pay attention to. So, but we also came up with some challenges. The question, yes, other types of actors in the built environment, in the housing space have challenges. But we argue that if you are a self-builder, you are in a particular situation due to our institutions. So that if you are self-builder, you may basically have to deal with many more challenges that a real estate agent or a firm coming in will start some tax holidays here and there, whatever. The key, one of the issues that we kept hearing is access to land. Access to land. Particularly challenges with the price of land. It may surprise you that in a place like Setima, we need a certain number, we need more than 100,000 Ghana cedis at a time. I'm sure today, if you go and interview, probably the price has gone up. In Gulfport, we're told that if you don't have $250,000, $300,000, $200,000, you cannot get a plot of land there. Yeah, so you can see that. So the price of land is becoming scarce and it's becoming more expensive. The other issue is about also the delays in the completion of the house. Lack of, I think the fact that gave us a lot of ratings. The delays in completing the house. And then also realized that in many of the communities that we studied, buildings or construction weren't adhering to any formal planning codes and so on. And that many were building even without permits. Yeah, without permits at all. In many places, you'll find that the basic infrastructure were not there, even for communities like Takofiamo and others, or even Christian villages which have been there for all these years. The basic, drains to communities were not there. We also found that by looking at broadly, particularly one of the peri-urban communities that we look at, Tachima, that Sabo is a major contributor to uncontrolled urbanization. Yeah, it's a major contributor to urban sprawl on planned communities. It allows cities to expand uncontrolled because people are burdened, and local governments are also going to be able to respond in terms of the rapid nature of the development, and it contributes to settlements which, it balance the city and contributes to unplanned settlement. In the course of our analysis, we spent time, as Dr. Atta said, also doing a lot of desktop review, and we were surprised that despite the dominance of self-build in Ghana, even our national housing policy, makes no direct reference to self-build. So these are some of the challenges that we came up with. And so things like this, communities without drains, communities without proper roads, houses which are being eroded because the basic drains are not there. These were things that we found, and some of the challenges that we found in these communities. So to conclude, we say that if you look at the demographic profile of our country, in terms of the rapid population growth and rapid movement to cities, self-build remains the most feasible and viable option for one to be able to house his family, and so, or the household. And so that is going to persist for the short to the medium term. We don't see this is going to be the path that many of us will have to be able to house ourselves. We also see that our society is also changing, and there is what you call a shift away. The census data tells us quite completely that there's a shift away from shared facilities, or houses that have multiple households. We are moving away from the compound house to the self-contained, and that will mean that there's less and less number of affordable housing for the poor or low-income groups, and they would have to find a way to be able to house themselves. Yes, housing conditions have improved for individuals. In fact, if you look at the census report, you see that quite clearly. The number of improvised houses have gone down. But at the same time, we also have the other challenge with the self-build and the self-contained houses, which can't house many of us. So we argue that we need to be able to, given that this is going to be the way out for many of us, there's the need for us to be able to pay attention and to make sure that whatever support in terms of policy that can be provided to this type of housing, we do that. Not only to provide housing for ourselves, but also a means of generating employment and supporting the growth of our country. So we've indicated a number of things, municipalities working hand in hand with our communities, our traditional leaders on the issue of land access. In fact, in Tachima last week, when we brought up this issue, the chiefs were arguing that they don't contribute to the rising land prices, and that is we, the individuals, because the chief gave this example. Well, he's about to dispose of his land, and somebody comes and buy 20 plots. The person will only hold on, probably build on 2 plots, and the person is holding on to the other 18. Why? The speculation. And so I think we've said in other fora that in this country we don't tax undeveloped land or vacant land. I think we need to look at some of these things so that, if possible, land which have not been developed can be taxed for not only for revenue purposes, but also as a way of preventing, speculation in the land sector and trying to dampen down this continuous rising in land prices, which is across the whole country. That will also help in curbing the uncontrolled urban expansion. We have a number of policies, the National Urban Policy Framework and actually the Land Use Spatial Planning Act and so on. We need to be able to really implement some of these things to improve land use and spatial planning. And then specifically, we also make the point that there is the need for the municipalities to work hand in hand with communities in a joint effort to tap into the energies of some of these communities so that basic infrastructure can be provided. Some of these communities, if you look at the land prices, and that a plot of land is being sold. And yet, if I remember very well, at the time when we were doing the field work in Gulf Coast, when we were told that a plot of land is about $250,000, yet the roads were not all that one would expect. I think municipalities working with communities, especially the land owners association, probably some of these things can be resolved. The other last but one, which is the issue about the need to educate and sensitize our artisans. In Tachima, we realized a particular type of what you call a building where the house may be of this height, but the roof is about 3 times the height. And we feel that that those kinds of designs of construction basically consume building materials for no good purpose. And there may be some form of education from architects, trained architects, and what have you would help us. We also, as a form of land policy, is that there's the need to have some policy focus on self-build. Either local government and government providing direct intervention, the supply side, whatever can be done to make inputs, labor, finance cheaper, so that self-builders can build at an affordable price. And then also, we know that if the macroeconomic, which is the indirect approach, if the macroeconomic environment is improved, we have a banking sector where the interest rates are not too high that people can afford. Inflation is managed or kept. Building inputs are likely to be manageable or affordable to self-builders. So these are some of them. Thank you very much.